Does the United States, and particularly the Biden administration, have the moral standing to lecture other countries about violations against human rights when they, the Biden administration, are engaging in precisely those same or similar violations in this country? When China launched its massive crackdown against political dissidents in Hong Kong, Ned Price, the spokesman of the State Department, had this to say. It's kind of a statement that has to be heard to be believed. He says, "We are deeply concerned by Hong Kong authorities' selective use of the national security law to arbitrarily target independent media organizations." He goes, "The charges of, quote, collusion," and he goes on to say, "appear to be entirely politically motivated." He goes on to accuse the Chinese government of going after people for the sole reason that they are political opponents of the regime. Well, again, we have no sense of irony here. Here's a guy who can, with a straight face, say all this at the same time that his own administration is systematically going after political dissidents, has people held, non-violent people who didn't even break a window, held in solitary confinement for half a year without ever even being tried or convicted of anything. So the hypocrisy, the doublespeak, the embarrassing lack of any sense of self-consciousness is really what is so telling. Selective prosecution has been the heart of the Biden administration's crackdown. And selective prosecution was also a characteristic of what has happened over the past 4 years. The prosecutions of Roger Stone, of Papadopoulos, of Michael Flynn. So this is not a case of a free society getting on its moral high horse and looking down on a repressive society. The simple truth, and this is, by the way, a point made in a recent article in Revolver magazine, which goes into this in some detail. They say it, and they put it rather harshly, but I think it's true. Quote, "It is simply one empire of censorship and propaganda hypocritically trashing another." Wow. So there's here an attempt to make, and you cannot carry this too far, a moral equivalence between what is going on in the United States and in China. It was Vladimir Putin who observed when some Western press, American press, were attacking him. How are you treating Navalny? Aren't you going after your political opposition? Aren't you trying to undermine democracy? And Vladimir Putin said, well, what about the January 6th protesters? Didn't they come to protest? Weren't they unarmed? Aren't they sitting in jail right now? Wasn't one of them shot? It's very difficult not to listen to this, even though coming from a political adversary, an international adversary, and an all-around bad guy, but nevertheless go, well, this is actually uncomfortably true about what our government is doing. Very interestingly, the hypocrisy of the American government's attack on China is not a kind of international secret. It's not just Dinesh pointing it out in his podcast. The Chinese know it. Here's the Chinese newspaper talking about it. They make the observation, wait a minute, you're talking to us about censorship? Didn't digital media in the United States, working in concert with the Biden administration, shut down Trump's account? Isn't he a political opponent? Didn't you shut his down? They go on to say that they even mentioned Parler. They say that this Apple Daily, which is a newspaper suppressed in China, they go, Apple Daily wasn't as influential as Parler, and yet there was a coordinated attack, again, supported by the Democrats in the Congress to shut down this platform. So the Chinese are like, what are you talking about? They say, quote, Western intervention is pale and weak. It's hypocritical morality. This kind of critique, which, by the way, the Chinese are kind of used to, has completely lost its moral force. And then Revolver concludes the article with making, I think, a very tragic point, that not only is this moral authority being lost on the world stage, but it's being lost solely by the actions of the American elite. They're throwing away America's moral authority. And this means that at a time when America has become weakened in other ways, we don't no longer have the kind of economic dominance that we had, for example, in the aftermath of World War II. Our military is overstretched, and quite frankly, because of bad leadership, we haven't fared very well in recent wars. I mean, I guess our latest success was the Gulf War, but even in the Gulf War, we didn't get rid of Saddam Hussein. But otherwise, from Vietnam to Afghanistan to Iraq, it's been not exactly a positive record. And then if you look at American society, its dysfunctional culture, its Hollywood depravity, its drug epidemics, all the racial turmoil in the country, it's really hard to say that America is now a magnet to the world. Everyone's like, oh, I want that. I want to live in that culture. I want to be part of that society. It's so exciting. Well, no, not anymore. Not anymore. And at this time, when one of the few things left for America was the moral force of its example, look, in America, we can speak our minds. In America, we have freedom of religion. In America, the government doesn't go after you for the sole reason that you disagree with them. Even those things are now no longer true. And so this is a moral authority that hasn't been, quote, lost. It's one that has been actively and tragically thrown away.